Today, the missionaries of the AWA Guyana Outpost begin their day with an activity that is very familiar to them. Yet it might seem a bit strange for many others who are accustomed to modern-day conveniences. They begin the day by rationing fuel and making sure that both planes are ready for flight, should an emergency medevac call come in.
Getting fuel to this area, as you know, airplanes run on fuel. We can't do anything if we don't have fuel. And when we first got to Guyana, we were exploring how we would handle that. We're not allowed to fill barrels of fuel at the airport. We have to have a really excessive insurance policy to be able to do that, so that was really not an option for us. So actually what we do is when a pilot flies into town, we fill up all the tanks and we fly the airplane back to Mabaruma, and then we siphon out the amount of fuel that we don't need. We keep the minimum in there to get to Georgetown.
It's important that the aircraft stand ready, because at any given moment they might need to spring into action and launch a flight to rescue someone from the jungle and take them into a higher level of medical care in the capital city of Georgetown. Laura Labor begins to siphon out the fuel by hand into empty jerry cans. It's sometimes tricky to get the fuel to begin to siphon, but once it does, the fuel flows steadily. The crew use the planes as a fuel camel. Since the white Cessna 206 made the last flight from Georgetown, it has the most fuel in it. They will now siphon the extra fuel out of it and leave just enough for it to make another flight to Georgetown. They will take the extra fuel and put it in the Cessna 1182 so it too has enough fuel to make a flight. These planes hold their fuel tanks in their wings. There are two separate tanks, one in each wing. This helps the plane maintain its balance, puts fuel up high away from the engine, and helps keep the overall size of the plane down by utilizing the empty space in the wings for fuel tanks.
Yeah, we're siphoning fuel out so we can store fuel here. When we do hinterland flights without going to Georgetown, we need to have extra fuel stored here, and we can't actually ship it in barrels. So we have to fly it in the airplane, take it out here. We leave the minimum in to get to Georgetown, and then hopefully we can go back to Georgetown and refill and just keep storing it that way until we really need it.
The Cessna 206 can hold roughly about 92 gallons of fuel, while the Cessna 182 only carries about 65. It takes around 40 gallons to make a round-trip flight to Georgetown. However, oftentimes the flights turn into multi-stop trips, and the mission pilots often stop in other villages along the way in order to be most efficient with time, fuel, and funding. Without the luxury of a gas pump, this activity is a vital chore the missionaries must do in order to ensure that they have plenty of fuel so that they are able to do their jobs in the mission field.
It's a hassle. Sometimes we'll take it off of this plane and then just go and store it in barrels. And then as we need it, we just kind of stockpile it and then use it as we need it.
Laura Labor is one of the pilots in Guyana, but she is also an A&P mechanic. She's very accustomed to working on, around, and in these airplanes. The missionaries try to keep the amount of fuel even in both fuel tanks. If one tank is empty and the other full, the plane will fly lopsided. So in order to avoid that, they try their best to keep the tanks balanced.
If one is unequal, you're going to fly kind of crooked like that. So you want to make sure it's more or less equal. Even when you load, like say there's a really big person on one side and a lighter one on the other side, you're going to tend to fly a little bit crooked. So besides that, that's the only reason really. So you can burn on either side that you want. On this one it burns equally on both sides, just for flying stability.
Almost 80% of Guyana is covered with thick jungle, and there are very few roads that lead out to Georgetown. Not only that, 70% of the country's population lives in these hard-to-reach areas of the jungle. Because no one can guess when these emergencies might happen, the AWA pilots try to keep their airplanes fueled and ready to fly.
Our agreement with, or partnership, I should say, with the Ministry of Health, what we do with them is try and work with the programs that they already have, rather than trying to create something duplicate or parallel to them. So we allow them to decide what is an emergency, and they'll call us and ask us to go as soon as possible to wherever the village is, wherever the patient is. And so we'll go and collect them. And what we also do is, depending on how much, like if there's only one patient to pick up, we keep like a list of people on standby from either the hospital or other villages that need to go out. And sometimes the reasons are personal, sometimes they're medical. And then if we have a seat, we just quickly call them and say, run out to the airstrip, we have a flight, and come on out with us.
I think our greatest need for the project is fuel for the aircraft. A lot of people don't want to give money for fuel because it just seems boring, it's not exciting, it's not a house that you can take a picture of and say, this is the money that, this is where my money went. But if it weren't for fuel, we couldn't fly. And without flying, there's many, many lives that would not be saved. And so, and it's very expensive. Here, fuel costs about $9 a gallon. And with all the flying we do, it takes about $500 US to fill a tank of gas. With a tank of gas, there could be at least 30 people who are directly impacted with that one tank of gas, with flying them to Georgetown and back. Sometimes with our flights, what we're doing is flying supplies into people's houses or into villages. Sometimes we're flying bodies even if they don't survive. And so the peripheral impact that fuel has is really, really great. And I wish that people would understand that more.
But there's times where we're here and we run out of money for fuel. And the community calls, asks us for flights, and we have to say no. And I get frustrated with that because, to me, that's one of the main points why we're here. And if we run out of fuel, then we're not here to be able to complete the mission that we're here for.
The airplanes fly 3 to 4 days a week on average, I would say. And if we launch a flight, it may end up being an average one would probably have 3 to 5 legs in the flight, where we might pick up patients in one place, other patients somewhere else, and then after we take them out, perhaps you take patients back home to another village. So it usually involves several stops. So if the plane gets a 10 o'clock call to do a medevac, the plane's probably not going to be back until about 5 o'clock in the evening, if it can make it back that same day at all. And usually, if you get called to do a flight, you probably end up flying between 3 and 5 hours in order to complete all the things that we tie into that flight.
Shortly after they finish fueling the planes, the chief pilot, Judd Wickwire, gets a call for an emergency medevac. In situations like these, the pilots don't have a lot of time to waste. Since the plane is already fueled, all he has to do is grab his pre-packed flight bag. Judd now needs to prepare the plane for his patient. He removes one of the seats and lays down a foam pad. Before every flight, the pilots inspect the plane thoroughly. They look at the prop, the wings, tail, brakes, oil, and fuel. They want to make certain the plane is in prime condition for the skies before they let any passenger climb aboard. Next, Judd must call in his flight plan. He must call air traffic control in Georgetown and inform them that he'll be in the skies and that he intends to fly into the Ogle Airport. This helps keep track of planes as well as prevents mid-air collisions.
That's air traffic control, and every flight you have to file a flight plan. As simple as that. But they need to know that you're in the air so they can advise other traffic.
With all his preparations finished, Judd is finally ready to take off toward Baramida to pick up his emergency patient. Judd has traveled this route many times, and the AWA mission team has been working with the village of Baramida for some time now. They have developed a trusting relationship together and have directly impacted many in this village.
There is a Tashao in a village. A Tashao means chief or captain or leader of a village. They call them Tashaos, and every village has them. There is a village of Baramita that when we first started coming here, they said, you know what, you can come here and you can fly us out, but we don't want anything to do with their religion. And now that we've been doing flying for them and some health seminars, they've begged us to come and live there. And we've even started building a house there. Well, the other day, the Tashao got very, very sick.
Well, I learned to fly in British Columbia in a place called Squamish, which is a small community, but it's right in the mountains because I wanted to learn to fly in the mountains. And that's in British Columbia. And that was actually 30 years ago. And in that 30 years, I've flown every year, and I actually don't think I've gone more than 3 or 4 months without flying at all in that period. There's a lot of differences flying here to the States, but honestly, where I've done most of my flying in northern British Columbia, northern Canada, it's actually not that much different. Obviously, it's hotter, but it's not. You deal with the same kind of circumstances with limited communication, limited weather reporting, remote airstrips. flying over a lot of inhospitable terrain. When you're flying in the continental U.S., for the most part, if you fly at a decent altitude, you can almost be within flying distance of an airport, almost the entire continent, or a decent place to land. Whereas here, and for the most part where I used to fly in British Columbia, once you're airborne, once you're out of the gliding range of the airport that you took off from, there may not be another one until you reach your destination.
Very few of these villages have constant reliable electricity, or current as the Guyanese call it. Therefore, it is very difficult to medically treat and provide care to someone who has critical needs. Oftentimes, in order to save their lives, patients are flown to the hospital in Georgetown, where they can receive a higher level of care.
The patient we're picking up is the captain, or as they call him, the Tashao of the village. And I don't know exactly what happened or why, but he's kind of an elderly, frail man, but he was apparently attacked and beaten. And they said this morning he lost consciousness. So they called us here about an hour ago and said they couldn't pick him up. So I don't know exact conditions. We're waiting for him they'll bring him out of the clinic here in a minute.
As Judd waits for his patient, he tries to gather more information about the patient's condition from family members and friends. However, no one seems to have very much information, and the information they do give seems conflicting. It's a puzzling situation, and no one seems to have a straight answer.
All right. He's in the clinic? He's in the clinic? Okay, all right. Let's make a space here for him.
It's a very unusual occurrence for an elder, let alone a Tashao, to be a victim of domestic violence.
They'll have some drinking, and between the younger men, sometimes they'll get out their cutlasses, machetes, and cut each other up. But that's more between the younger guys. I don't know why something would happen to an elderly, like an elder in the village. I don't know if I've seen that happen before. So I don't know what the explanation is.
It's important that Judd have the information about the patient's condition so he can pass it along to the doctors in Georgetown. Finally, the patient appears from the clinic. He is unable to walk and is floating in and out of consciousness. So the village members carry him out to the plane. It's an uncomfortable transport, but in these conditions, you have to make the best of the situation you are in.
Pass his feet in first. All right, we'll bring him. How you doing, man?
Now that the Tashao is in the plane, Judd begins to strap him in. There will be one other person traveling on today's flight. He will accompany the patient to the hospital. Unfortunately, however, since the aircraft is so small, oftentimes family members cannot travel with their injured relatives. Before the Tashao leaves, he calls over one of his family members, takes off his ring, and gives it to him. This action shows that the Tashao himself knows that he is very sick, and he wants his family to have his ring should anything happen. The Tashao is an important figure in the village, and many people are worried for his well-being. Many of the villagers come and wish him well, while Judd goes to the clinic and speaks with the medics to get the final word on the patient's condition. Most villages do not have doctors, but have medexes, which are comparable to a nurse practitioner. Finally, it's time to leave, and Judd prepares the plane again. But before they can take off, Judd offers a word of prayer and asks for a safe flight and healing for the Tashao.
Be good and ask especially be with this patient. May your healing hand be upon him, and be with his family too, in Jesus' name. Amen.
As Judd taxis and takes off towards Georgetown, nothing is visible but jungle canopy. It would have been impossible to get this patient out of the jungle in time had it not been for the aircraft.
Doing a medical evacuation out of the jungle is important to a person that is ill, and time is of a critical factor.
As Judd flies towards Georgetown, he must keep an eye on the weather. Turbulent weather, rain, and wind seem to be in the forecast for today. All of the added turbulence make this trip to the hospital even more uncomfortable for the ailing patient. However, Judd, an experienced pilot, still manages to safely navigate through the skies.
Apparently he'd been attacked for some reason. I can't explain why. I don't understand how that would happen or why that would happen. He'd been beaten to some degree, but it had been almost 2 weeks before. But when they called us, he had taken a turn for the worse, and he'd actually kind of almost lost consciousness or gone nearly into unconsciousness. So they called us, but of course they don't know what the problem is. and that's the difficult part out here. How do you decide whether someone is just, has some other passing ailment or something critical that they need to go out and get treatment for?
When they begin to reach the outskirts of Georgetown, Judd must be in constant communication with Ogle, the airport he intends to land in. This airspace is the most heavily congested, and it's important to be aware of your surroundings and share with other pilots your exact position to prevent any collisions. As he reaches the airport and touches down on the paved runway, Judd is relieved that he has safely transported another patient. Now that they have arrived, he can transfer the patient to the local medical facility, and he can focus on his next set of patients. But as he arrives, Judd looks around and doesn't see anyone waiting to pick up the Tashao to take him to the hospital. The drop-off area is completely empty, and there are no ambulances or paramedics to be found. Communication is a big challenge here in Guyana, and it seems that once again, a message did not get delivered to the ambulance services. So pilot Judd makes a few phone calls and tries to find his patient a safe ride to the hospital. Judd can't wait here for too long because he is constantly racing against the clock. There is a no-fly rule after dark, and he does not want to be stuck here overnight, especially since he has 2 other patients lined up for today. So he must quickly find a way to get the Tashao to the hospital. Finally, a taxi arrives, and they must carefully pull the patient out from the plane and put him in the vehicle. The patient is in a lot of pain since he has just spent the past hour in turbulent skies, so they must try and be extra gentle with him as they try to relocate him into the taxi. Unfortunately, since this isn't an ambulance, there is nowhere for the Tashao to lie down, so he must be placed in a seat and sit up from this point on. As the Tashao heads off straight for the hospital, Judd and the entire AWA team can breathe a prayer of thanks that they were again able to safely deliver another patient and save another life.
Judd was able to medevac him out, and it turns out he had appendicitis and had ruptured. So we were very, very happy to help with him. He's been very instrumental in helping us and very supportive of us, and so we were very happy that we could help him with that.
Turns out we got him into the hospital and he needed an emergency appendectomy. So certainly left too long, he certainly would have died if left in that community without getting the treatment he needed.
While in Georgetown, Judd must also refuel the plane. Since this is their only way of getting fuel, it's important that every time he or any of the pilots fly to Ogle, they purchase fuel. The amount of fuel they can purchase is dependent on the amount of funding they receive from donors in North America. They aren't always able to fill up the plane, but have to keep a watchful eye on their funding.
So literally we have to use the airplane as a camel. We fill it up, we fly it out here, we siphon it out into jerry cans and into barrels, and then we put it back in as we need it. We always keep a minimum in the plane just to get us to Georgetown, and that's the way we do it. There's just no other option.
Today they are able to purchase 211 liters of fuel, roughly 50 gallons.
Like when our return flights or any flights that we have extra seats, we have this list of people that call, and by priority if they've called, and we all, of course, we prioritize by medical reasons too, we'll try and place them on the flight so they can get it free. And nobody pays for these flights, of course. There's no charge to any of the people who are flying, and so they can rely on that.
Judd doesn't have much time. His new patients have arrived at the airport. The AWA team always makes a great effort to never waste a flight. Anytime they have an emergency flight, they have a standby list with patients that are ready and waiting to travel.
There's a project that was started in Canada that we've greatly appreciated. Is someone started sending us Beanie Babies. And so if we fly a child who is sick to the hospital, we give them a little tiny Beanie Baby. And then they can just take that to the hospital and carry it with them. And it's been fun to give those out because, you know, that little Beanie Baby will probably be the only stuffed animal that child will ever own. And so that's a really special thing. And we always tell them, this is a gift from Canada or this is a gift from the States.
Flying can often be a scary event for the Guyanese, who aren't used to motorized vehicles. So Judd offers a small stuffed toy to hopefully comfort the children while in the air. This mother has flown in because she had a complication during labor, and now she is returning home, back to Mabaruma with her new baby boy, who she names Leroy.
You have a name yet?
The second patient for this flight is a 3-year-old girl with a heart defect. She unfortunately was born with this condition and must receive medical treatment every couple of weeks. In order to live, she needs an operation that unfortunately they do not perform in Guyana. The AWA team has flown this patient many times before.
These are going back home to Mabaruma. So we've got the newborn. The challenge for them is that the only other option for them is to travel on the boat, which is a 24-hour journey on the high seas, which is, well, open sea anyway. It can be quite rough, very crowded boat, no facilities. So it's always nice to get them a 1-hour trip back instead of that. And I think you were in for some treatment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for yourself?
For
the child?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What kind of problem she having?
She having a heart disease.
Okay. Yeah, she needs to have actually open heart surgery.
There's a little girl here who was born with a hole in her heart. And several weeks ago, I was able to fly her to Georgetown because she was getting worse. And so she went to the hospital, and the doctor said that she needed surgery over in Cuba. They have a working relationship with Cuba, so a lot of the major surgeries are flown out to there. And the family didn't have any money to do this, because what happens is the government will pay for half of that surgery, but the family has to come up with the other half. And the other half was about $500 US, and of course they don't have that much. And so the father told the mother, the father was still here in Mabaruma, talked to the mother on the phone and said, well, just bring her back, and if she lives, she lives, if she dies, she dies. And it was so sad to me. And so we actually have a fund of someone who set up some money that can be used for some of these medical emergencies. And so we called her and we said we'd be happy to pay for the other half, but then the doctor decided that it wasn't proper timing for the girl. She was getting more sick. I understand all the details, but for whatever reason, the daughter, she wasn't ready yet to have that surgery. And so just the other day, then Judd brought her back here to Mabaruma, but the offer's still out there. So as soon as she's ready for that surgery, then we'll be able to fly her to Georgetown, and then we'll pay to have her surgery.
As normal protocol for all the AWA pilots, Judd prays before his flight. He asks for blessings of safety and healing on their return trip home.
With this little newborn baby going back to his family, and also, most especially this little girl with the problem with her heart, just has their healing hand, and we'll be upon her and provide opportunities for her healing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Judd has had a busy day, but it's just halfway through. He must now safely navigate the skies again and return everyone home to Mabaruma.
Being here for the longer term and developing relationships with people, and that all comes down to trust. And they know that we've been here for this many years, and we're still going to be here when they need us in the future, so that when you have someone with, say, a chronic condition that needs treatment, and we can take them back and forth so they don't have to spend months and months living away from their families, and trust to know that. And sometimes things go wrong, and people sometimes go out for treatment and they die, and that's a fear that people have. Of course, their fear is such that they may not send their family members out for treatment because they may die, and if they die, they may not come back, or if they go for treatment, they may not even be able to come back for months at a time. So knowing that we've been here and that we've taken people out, we bring them back, and sometimes we bring back people that have died, but even that gives them confidence in us, because it shows that we care enough to bring back even the people who died so that they can have a proper burial with their families. And that's a very meaningful thing to people out here. It's something that they don't get from anywhere else.
Another ministry that the team incorporates in their flights is offering religious literature for the passengers to read and take home with them. On the hour-long flight, many pick up the magazines and read about the love of our Lord. Soon enough, the familiar sights of their hometown, Mabaruma, come into view. Once on the ground, everyone is able to disembark. Now that everyone is safely on the ground, the AWA team can call this a successful day. They balanced fuel, medevaced out an unconscious village leader, and delivered 2 babies back to their home village. But this isn't anything unusual for this mission team. In fact, this is a very regular day in the mission field of Guyana. And the entire AWA team is thankful that they are able to minister and that they had enough fuel funding to make these flights today possible.
Any day that I can come home at the end of the day and know that even for one person, an adult or a child, something that I've been able to do because of God-given skills to me that can make a difference in their life, then that day's a good day, and that's fulfilling for me.
Fuel equals saved lives. And a tank of fuel goes a long way. 1 tank of fuel gives us 4 hours of flight time. And in that 4-hour period of time, we could evacuate somewhere between 10 patients. We can transport pastors in for meetings, help the church with local Bible work that needs to be done. 4 hours of flying is tremendous, what we can do with an airplane. If I could leave you with one thing after watching this video with regard to aviation ministry, is fuel equals saved lives. If we have fuel, we can go out and we can save lives not only physically, but for eternity.
Jesus said in the Great Gospel Commission of Matthew 28:19 and 20 that we are to go into all the world. Well, Adventist World Aviation is dedicated to doing just that. There are between 6.5 and 7 billion people now that live on planet Earth, and 2 billion of them have never heard of Jesus. Of that 2 billion, 800 million of them can only be reached by means like aircraft or through aviation support. We go into the unreached areas of the world. What we find when we go in there is we find death and disease and despair. What we bring them is hope and health and life, and a great gospel message that Jesus loves them, that there is somebody out there that does care. They often ask, why do you do this? And we say, because Jesus loves you. And so the message that we bring them is absolute hope. Since its inception in 1995, AWA, or Adventist World Aviation, has been able to relieve over 35 epidemics. We have literally flown millions of missionary miles, relieving the pain and suffering of those that live in these remote parts of the world, helping them. Will you pray for us? We need prayer more than anything else. If you'd like more information, please contact this station, 3 Angels Broadcasting Network, or call the number on the screen. Thanks for watching.